So I've asked Tim to help kind of lead this session because I think he has probably the most technical experience in terms of interoperability and, you know, getting platforms to speak to each other, because as you know, our session topic for today is all about platform scaling and creating synergies. Now, I think all of us in the business know how useful it is not to have to reinvent the wheel every time we're wanting to do something new, and to build on things that have gone before and to create links where possible. So I thought I'd just start off with literally probably 5 or 10 minutes, just chatting around our experiences from the FBIS perspective in terms of how we've developed things, how we've created collaborations and synergies, and where we've piggybacked on other systems and vice versa. And really just to kind of get a sense of, get us all on the same page, thinking about the same issues, and then probably hand over to Tim to sort of chat around some of the aspects. He's got an interesting idea of how we could potentially run the system today, but then essentially talk through these 5 questions. So, you know, why are synergies amongst platforms important? What kind of synergies exists amongst our existing platforms that we have or are developing? What are the technical challenges, obviously, to creating this interoperability between platforms? And not only technical challenges, there may well indeed be institutional challenges for interoperability. And the last question is, what spatial scales are appropriate? I mean, I think most of us have developed platforms that are country specific, but there are examples of regional ones, and indeed there could be a broader scale, continental scale. So I'm going to just dive in. I've got about 6 slides just to kind of set the pace or set the tone for the day. So by way of example, with the Freshwater Biodiversity Information System, the version 3 was released in 2020. This was a system specifically for tracking change in South African's freshwater biodiversity. And we developed it in a very generic way so that the underlying engine could indeed be transplanted into another country. And our experimental guinea pig was you, Beth, and your team, where we developed the Rwanda Biodiversity Information System. So building on what had already been done for FBIS, we were able to roll out of an instance of ARBIS for Rwanda, and then through various customizations, made it so that obviously the data was country specific. And then more recently, we've been working with Emily and Charity from the Okavango, and we've rolled out a version which we call Orbis. And this obviously serves data just for Botswana, not just Okavango, but Botswana. And it's not only freshwater focused, it's actually all biodiversity focused. And what's really nice about these systems which piggyback on those that go before them is that you're no longer starting at starting block. So for the Rwanda system, we were starting on the 50-meter line, and for the Orbis, we were starting perhaps on the 75-meter line. And in that way, everyone benefits. And I think what's really important is these feedback loops that I've indicated. Now with the Rwanda system, we had great feedback where we could improve the functionality in FBIS through building and integrating the functionality of the Rwanda system. And similarly, although to a lesser extent with the Okavango system, because it had limited funding, but indeed the hope is going forward that whatever gets developed in the more recent versions, all those improvements get rolled back down to the original system, which in this case was FBIS. And then very importantly, what is the bottom is what we call the mothership. This is the engine of all of these information systems, the Biodiversity Information Management System, which is developed by Cartosa with input from all of us. So that's the one issue I wanted to point out. The second is the synergies that exist between existing systems already. And in this case, the example between FBIS and inwards. Some of you were in last year's seminar series, and you'll recall we both gave presentations, both the FBIS team and the inwards team, which is a ward, Hugo and Sharon. But in the case of the synergy between these two systems, the biodiversity data is added to FBIS, but then sitting at the inwards decision tool interface, the same biodiversity is accessed from within the inwards platform. And that way your catchment managers has access to biodiversity data, but it's not stored on their own system, it's stored in FBIS. And similarly, the FBIS users can access water quality data via the inward system through a third-party data layer, which really just serves Department of Water and Sanitation water quality data, which is available as a downloadable CSV file. So this again provides extra access to information that isn't necessarily on one system only. The other synergistic relationships that we've built into FBIS, just to stimulate some conversation, is we rely quite heavily on the Global Biodiversity Information System. And I know that a lot of projects in the JRS grantee stable do actually publish data to GBIF. So within FBIS, we rely on GBIF for the taxonomic backbone, and we rely on the global IUCN for global conservation status. And in this way, we don't have to keep these conservation statuses updated, for example. We rely on the global system for keeping these things ticking over. We also have 3 primary data sources in FBIS. The FBIS data is obviously data we've actually manually consolidated, but here I want to point out the synergistic relationship between the GBIF and the virtual museum. In the case of GBIF, we, through developing master lists, are able to harvest all existing GBIF data on the system. And in this case, we've got almost 140,000 biodiversity records from GBIF that are pulled into FBIS for the various modules we have. And similarly, we link to the virtual museum, which is citizen science data, in this instance for frog map and odonata map. And we also have, through APIs, links to other third-party layers, such as the citizen science mini-SAS data. So that's all I really wanted to point out from the synergistic relationships and the links between different platforms. And I wanted to end off with just 3 slides where I point out the other information systems that already exist in the GRS stable of projects. And I know that this is by no means exhaustive, and I'm sure there are more that are either recently released or in the pipeline. But I just want to illustrate the need for conversation and sort of collaboration, which would hopefully benefit all of us. So obviously Uganda has a freshwater biodiversity portal. This is a country-specific portal. ARCOS is a regional information system for the Albertine Rift Valley. And then we've got ones for the Tana River, which I think are still under development. The Birdie project for Sanby, the Groundwater Management Institute is more of a portal than serving actual data, but it has the same sort of look and feel and flavor. And that brings me back to our questions, which I'm now keen to just stop sharing my screen and open up our discussion for the session. And Tim, I'd like to just invite you at this stage to sort of share your ideas of how we could go forward. We're happy to either just chat through each question or potentially use a slightly more innovative method that Tim's quite keen to dive into.
Yeah, thanks. So, hi everybody. In case you haven't met me, I'm Tim Sutton. I work at Cartosa. We worked very closely with Helen and Jeremy and the team from FRC, building the BIMS platform and Freshwater Biodiversity Information System that Helen curates the data of. And so we've had quite an interesting journey just in seeing how one builds a system from scratch, and also seeing other people also building systems from scratch at the same time as us. So I think that the topic is really close to heart because we put a lot of emotional and intellectual and physical energy into building what we have built, and it's all shared, and we want to save people the stress and effort of doing the same thing themselves. So I'm sort of glad to be talking about synergies today. I don't know if I should start my screen share. So I've set up this thing. It's like a virtual workshop board, and I thought we could, rather than just me sitting talking or trying to nudge people to talk, which is sometimes difficult, rather do sort of things a bit more interactively. So I've put the link into the chat for this board. I'll put it again in case you don't see it. If you click on that link, you'll arrive on the same board that I'm at now, and it's kind of like a virtual whiteboard that we can all work on together, and you can drop things onto it or whatever. So I've given some initial instructions, basically saying that if you agree with something or if something resonates with you, there's a little stamp icon here. You can go and put your own little stamp on each thing that you agree with or that resonates with you. And we're going to be doing some mind or brainstorming, and it works with these little cards. So if you click on here, there's a little, see, I have to take this thing back off again. And if you click on this little thing, it shows you can kind of drag and drop these cards, and then you can type your thoughts into the card. So think of it like a sticky, a whiteboard with sticky notes that we're going to be sticking on to the board. So I wanted to start the discussion with asking you to sort of participate in a poll, and I just have to remember how to unhide the poll. So if you zoom in a bit, you can use your use these plus and minus in the top right hand corner if things are too small. You'll see that I started the board with this poll here, which says basically, do you feel that your organization's needs differ from those from others, such that it requires you to be a kind of a lone wolf rather than one of the flock in terms of building your systems? So we've seen lots of systems being built. Helen showed some slides from various different projects, and I want to just understand and us to share a little bit like whether we think that we could have built our systems using something else out there, or did you look at other systems before you built yours and decide that nothing really matched what you needed, and so you felt this desire to build your own thing? So but think of it in terms of your needs rather than what you built. So are your needs that different from other organizations, or are they pretty similar to what you've seen within the forum? You can just click on the one, I think I have to start the voting here. Yeah, start the poll. So you can just click on the one that you identify with. And I'm going to run a little clock here. So we've got 3 minutes. And if you want to add any, come on the mic and say why you're choosing your choice, that would be also great.
I can't even get my name to pick up. Sorry, I'm technically challenged.
That's fine. But if you scroll across, can you see the poll?
Yes, I can. I just can't find Helen anyway.
Sorry, Tim, I'm maybe a little slow. I'm just not understanding how I have to do this here.
Let me see if I can see you on the board first. Have you clicked into the... No, that's... Have you clicked into the board?
I don't...
There's a link in the chat. So if you first start in the chat...
No, I already signed up, Tim. I'm in there and I'm watching all of you floating around with your name.
Okay. So if you see where most people are floating around, there's a poll question. You might have to zoom in on your screen a bit. And the question is asking, are your organization's needs very different from other organizations, which would require you to build your own system, your unique implementation? maybe you can just verbally answer if the technology's proving too awkward for you.
Well, I guess I missed a step because I don't know how to get my arrow in there anyway. I mean, I can see everyone else.
So maybe you can just respond verbally to the question. Beth, so would you like to just respond verbally rather than trying to wrestle with
I want to learn this.
okay.
No, it's okay. No, verbally, it's not going to get the better of me. Verbally, I can say, I think if I'm answering correctly, we, worked with Helen and Cartoza, so I think we found that was really valuable because Helen had already gone through setting it up with Cartoza, with you, and I think we maybe leapfrogged a lot of testing and issues and trials by doing it that way. Is that answering?
That is, yeah. And those that there were some that partly agreed. So that sort of indicates that you think like your organization's got some unique requirements that maybe not like overlapping well with other organizations. Does anybody want to add some comments? I saw Helen, Jeremy, you sort of in the middle camp, right?
I think I just clicked the wrong button, sorry.
Okay.
I'm going to just do it verbally from here on.
Yeah, okay, good. So do you want to add any thoughts on that? Helen, do you think that, for example, FBIS has some very unique requirements that wouldn't be applicable to other people building a similar platform?
I think probably 10 to 20% would be probably country specific, like if I'm thinking for FBIS, the SAS stuff, but then we built in functionality to be able to turn off and on certain aspects of the bigger engine. So I certainly think 80 to 90% would be completely applicable across systems, definitely.
Okay, great. So hopefully the technology doesn't overwhelm you all, and but that's great. Conversation started. So we're going to move across to the first question, which is why synergies among platforms are important. And the idea here is, again, just sort of to do a brain dump. And if you watch what I'm doing on the screen, you can take a card and just drop it in there, and you can say, for example, so we're looking at between organizations now. So between platforms, we can say, for example, to reduce data duplication would be one reason why we don't want to have every platform maintaining their own independent set of data. And so if you can, I'll run the timer again. If you can brainstorm your ideas about why it's important that platforms sort of are synergetic, or what's the right verb, or adjective. And I lost my little timer. I'm just going to start it again. I'll give you 3 minutes again just to brain dump your ideas there. Do you want to speak to me and I'll add a card for you? That's also fine if you're struggling with the... Don't worry if you find you've written the same card as somebody else. That's also useful information.
A question to Tim. I dropped off, had a power blackout, and I don't know what everyone is doing at the moment.
Okay, let's, we just, if you see on my screen share, we're doing like a collaborative whiteboard. I'm going to put a link in the chat again, if you couldn't see the link. And if you click in there, it will bring you into the whiteboard and you can actually create little post-it notes. So we're busy looking at this question number 3 now, why synergies amongst platforms are important, and sort of doing a bit of a brain dump. So everybody putting their ideas about why it's important that platforms can interoperate or collaborate.
Okay, thank you. Understood.
Let me know if you need any help. Beth, are you still adrift there, right? Oh, yeah, I see your card moving. Okay, you've got it.
No, Tim, I figured it out. I'm so happy.
I'm happy for you too. Okay, still got 45 seconds.
Looks like I was about to steal Jeremy's last card.
You can
run out of cards.
Control C and Control V cards, so you can just copy and paste them, drag them off the bottom little window here like this. The endless virtual supply of cards. So.
Okay, cool.
If you finished putting your ideas, you can also help to organize the cards. Maybe we can see some groupings that we can put things together. And, all right, so that's our time up. I don't know if anybody's still burning to add another card. You can give you a minute or two, but otherwise we can maybe just do a little summary.
Tim, can you add reduce confusion for users?
Sure.
Sorry, Andy.
We've all got nice big fonts making me look bad. So let me just give mine a bit of a bigger font there as well. Okay. Sure. Okay, so what can we see anything, some commonalities? I saw some things about fostering a collaborative environment. There was data duplication, I think. Does anybody want to comment on their cards? Ciro, did you manage to, who came in asking now? Was it Andrew or Ciro, you managing?
Andrew with the last card.
I see the cards, but I don't know how to create the card.
Okay, you can just grab one off the left like this, like you see on my screen, and just put it in and type your idea in, or you can just talk to me as well and I'll add it for you if you're struggling with it.
Okay, I see how it works. Thanks.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to add?
Not really. I'm just trying to get a.
Okay, so I mean, if we summarize a bit, we can see that. I mean, it's kind of obvious why we want to have synergies, but sometimes it's nice to just articulate the reasons for ourselves, to remind ourselves why we're doing it. Especially the wheel reinvention for me is a big part of it. Like that, we don't all want to spend a huge amount of time, money, and effort building the same thing, and rather focus on the value that we get from using the system rather than building the system itself. Beth, do you want to maybe comment on your cards? Your card?
It was just the one about what we had thought about when we were talking about how to connect platforms, was that you could get access to so much other information that you may not have the data, for your own platform. So it really expands what you can get access to.
Mm-hmm. Maybe also that's like a follow-on thought on that is that it provides a unified source of information, right? So you can go one place and get everything.
Yeah.
Jeremy, do you want to comment on any of your cards?
Hey Tim, hey, how's it? No, I mean, I think, yeah, my card was just about reinventing the wheel, but I was thinking it's, I guess that applies to a few different things, like including like, not spending funding on the same thing twice, and also not having to figure out the same workflows twice, and just basically recycling things so that we don't have to start from the beginning each time, and we can build on our previous grants or the grants of others. And I think there has been a lot of reinvention of wheels in this space. So yeah, for me, that was just an immediate thing that seemed like a huge benefit of of these kinds of synergies. So thanks.
Mike, you've written a cryptic dollar sign there. I presume you're alluding to finances in some way. Do you want to expand on your single character card? Oh, I think we got some audio issues from you.
I'm battling to hear you, Mark. If you want to write in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, Mike. I'm dying to hear what you're saying, but it's just sounding like a fish underwater. Excuse the biodiversity. All right. We'll look in the chat to see. Charity is saying your browser does not allow you to access it. Maybe if you try Chrome browser, or I'm not sure which browser you're using. It should work in all browsers.
I would imagine Mike's alluding to, like, it saves resources, because I also put that bullet up. I mean, if you, and as Jeremy mentioned, you can save money by building on what's gone before, and then use that money for other purposes that enhances everything going forward, I guess.
Amy's doing a great job of creating a taxonomy of ideas there for us. Yeah, Amy. Okay, so I think it's clear then we all have the sense of what we benefit from the synergies among the platforms. So we can move on to the next group here, which is on number 4. If you scroll across to the right, I'm going to unhide it like this, and then somebody's stealing the group. Emily, just put it back there. Wait a minute. Okay, just give me a second. Okay. So in this one, we want to look at what we're currently actually doing in terms of synergies between platforms. So this is more of a brain dump to see between everybody in the room, which systems you're interoperating with. Maybe we'll learn about some things that we didn't know that were out there that we could have been using to help build our systems and make them better. So again, I'm going to start the clock for 3 minutes, and if you can just brain dump your ideas into here. If you run out of cards, you can just drag a card from your deck at the bottom there as well. So,
do you mean, are you referring mostly to like the kinds of like other platforms that we're collaborating with, or specifically the types of synergies that we're looking to build with other platforms?
Maybe we can brain dump them both and put which things we're taking data and what kinds of services or connections we have between them. So, for example, if we have IUCN, the kind of synergy is that we are removing the need to manage the conservation status of species in our own platform. That makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right. We need more time, or? Okay, everyone's still furiously working on their cards, but I think we'll just try to do a bit of a recap then. So maybe we can start at the top left there. Maybe Beth, you want to talk a little bit about your card?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not like I might not say it's not specifically platforms, although African Parks has their data platforms and they're managing 2 parks in Rwanda. So we were able to get their information. We put it all into, they have the real-time data that they use, and they didn't want to share that. Of course, it makes sense, but we put everything into one point, like at the reception center, so we can, if a user comes, they can still be able to know like what species are in the country, what species are in a park without knowing where, because that still is open information. And then the other thing we've been struggling with is we have a platform for the herbarium specimens, which are we also, for the FBIS, we're trying to look at how to deal with the observation data and the specimen data, whether it would be valuable because we're geo-referencing the specimen data, and what that might look like, synergies among those two, because there would be cases where people could use the information from both, but we haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah, so the observation about using observations from both is maybe a good one to just put a little red card here, which is when you've got multiple avenues into the same data sets that might land up causing, data management issues, for example. Like that's something we've been struggling with how to move data in and out of GBIF without re-importing our own data, or re-importing the same data that we've imported before, but it's now known by a different observation ID. Mike, I don't know if your audio is any better. Do you want to try to come in and talk a little bit about your card?
Timmy said he's got a microphone problem.
Okay.
But he did in the chat say the history of biodiversity databases before FBIS came to a sudden stop because of financing. So that, I think that's what he meant in terms of his $ on the previous one. Always be mindful of follow the money, and not having enough money from a sustainability perspective. So to work smarter makes sense. Hopefully I captured that, Mike.
Yeah. Is this microphone any better?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, you summarized that correctly. I was also on this next one, the ability to collect data in one place, or for each organization to focus on its own strengths, is very important. So you don't have to have 5 different groups developing their own system, digitizing all the rivers in the country, who can collaborate on the base data as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent point. Which card was the second? I'm just trying to see. Did you have a second card saying that, or should we add a card there about the importance of synergies for accessing base data as well?
Yeah, Tim, that actually came up at our FBIS training sessions, which we've been running for 2 weeks now, where someone said, does the spatial layers that are served on FBIS, is it automatically grabbed from somewhere? And at the moment we know it's not, but I mean that it's probably that would be quite a good synergy to kind of we look at.
Thanks, Mike. Helen, do you want to talk a little bit about the cards that you added to the board?
I think some of it was already covered in my little intro. Like obviously we very strongly linked to GBIF for the taxonomic backbone, but then also for harvesting data from GBIF. So data that's been published in the past or historically or currently to GBIF, like all of the fish data from SIAB in South Africa gets published to GBIF. And so rather than adding it to FBIS as well, we just go and get that data from GBIF directly. And they publish it on an annual basis, so we harvest it, regularly as well. And then the other synergy is between IUCN, where we obviously rely on that for the global conservation status. And then the last one that I mentioned was the link between inwards, which is more of a water quantity and flow system. They rely on FBIS for biodiversity data, and we rely on FBIS on inwards for water quality data from Department of Water and Sanitation. Yeah, those are my main cards. Thanks.
Great. Jeremy, do you want to add your thoughts?
Yeah, mine's a bit of a repeat of Helen's, but just to kind of emphasize the way that I guess these data exchanges or synergies like between platforms, what I think is so cool and what makes them so worthwhile is that how like both sides can benefit from these kind of synergies. In one of the cases that Helen was mentioning now, I think the award data, the biosmart data on water quality and water quantity benefit a lot by having links with biodiversity data and vice versa. And I think similarly, in FBIS, we benefit a lot from being able to pull down data from the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And yeah, I mean, we're obviously also thinking about how to send data back that way that they don't yet have on their platform. So yeah, just a very valuable endeavor, in my opinion, these kinds of synergies. But Helen covered all the other main ones for FBIS.
Thanks, Jeremy. And Emily, do you want to chat a little bit about what your thoughts were? Is it Emily or Charity using Emily's computer? I'm not sure which way around.
No, it's me.
Okay.
Clicking between the Zoom and the things. Yeah, I've really appreciated the fact that we can use the same training materials from that were developed and that Helen's been going through with us, and we don't have to work out straight away. It's just really easy to jump into the next bit and tailor it to each platform.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thanks. I'm going to move on because we will run out of time otherwise. So let's go down to board number 5, which is below and to the left of the one that we were just looking at. And this one, we're asking what are the technical challenges to platform interoperability. So we've spoken about the things we're doing, but we sort of actually brought up a few challenges which you can maybe just articulate on this board and maybe add anything else there. So I'll just get our clock going. You can already have at it while I start the clock here. Hmm. All right, I'm gonna stop you there so that we don't run out of time at the end. I see some great thoughts already there. I really like Mike's one about the technical goalposts keep moving. I think that's something that we all kind of have experienced already working with these systems, and yes, the browser helps us overcome some of these things, but even in the browser world, the technology is changing all the time, and it's easy for systems to become defunct quickly. Let's see, Beth, have you got some thoughts you'd like to share with us?
No, just that, what it says there, I think one of our big challenges is with high turnover and funding issues with some staff and funding for the system itself, it can be quite challenging to have this, the interoperability, make sure it really works, because, it can be really frustrating for people if it's not working, then they maybe never come back and try it again.
Yes, agreed. Ciro, let's test out that shiny new microphone of yours and hear a bit from you.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, beautifully.
Yeah. Okay. So I was looking more at the data standards. So for example, if we are using the Darwin core and other people are not using Darwin core, then you will get things like interoperability having an issue, but also you have issues of different taxonomies of species. So if something is regarded as this particular by this particular name, and in another area it's known by a different name again, then you have things not being uniform. And also there's the issue of granularity of the taxonomy. Some people will go up to species level, others will go up to subspecies, others will go up to varieties. But depending on where it ends and the granularity, you can get everything again getting mixed up, and we don't know what exactly we are dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good, thanks. Anybody else want to just speak to their cards a bit? I did also put a mention there about what happens when you're interoperating with other systems, but that means you're introducing potential fragility into your system, right? If we depend on GBIF and GBIF goes down, FBIS will break, and that happens, throughout, and so that's one of the technical challenges, to figure out how to deal with that, or if you have to deal with it, or you just have to live with it. Okay, and then Emily, you've mentioned also about the data ownership and retention. Maybe you want to speak a little bit about that, because I think it's an important point as well.
It's just something we've encountered a lot. Like, lots of people are interested in contributing data. I mean, we want to expand a bit beyond biodiversity data, but then there are all sorts of issues relating to funding, relating to retention of embargoes and that kind of thing. And so there need to be technical scenarios in place whereby the data can be made accessible, but not necessarily completely open access.
Mm-hmm. So the embargo would be if somebody's publishing a paper or something and they don't want the data to go out until they've published, or?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great. Anybody else got any thoughts to add to that? Otherwise we can.
Tim, I had a question around, a thing I wrote about firewalls and organization security issues. I don't know to what extent that impedes interoperability from a technical challenge perspective.
Yeah, so you mean the technology firewalls, not the institutional?
Yeah, I don't really know what I mean. I just know, like, historically, we had a lot of people in DWS, and I think still in some organizations where they can't
access.
Tim can, I mean, Mike might be able to speak to it better to me, but I mean, maybe a web-based platform circumnavigates that. I'm not sure.
Do you want to add anything to that, Mike? Is it
Yeah,
still an issue in DWS, for example?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also sometimes the data sharing agreements might work between people at a scientific level, but the IT people are in a completely different group and a different mindset. So whereas the scientists are rushing to share stuff, the IT people are trying to turn off the tap so that don't let viruses and things in.
Well, the power in South Africa.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you for that. Let's move on to the next board on the right. So now we're looking at, rather than the technical, the institutional challenges, and maybe just unlock quickly. Yeah. There we go. So I'll start the clock again. Maybe so we're talking about, rather than technology, why the bosses won't let us play in the same playpen or what have you. There's some people in the room that I haven't seen cards from, so apologies for not giving you a chance to speak. So, but if you do have any thoughts, Charity or Andrew, John, who else, Nancy, please feel free to just chip in if you've got something, and maybe the technology is not being your friend and you want to just verbally tell us your thoughts. All right. So maybe Emily, do you want to give us a little précis of your thoughts that you've been adding?
So I've had something just recently where I had a internal funding potential for innovation. But then when I put through funding for Orbis, they said, well, but this isn't going to lead to commercialization. You're not going to make money out of this. You're working with other people. They might be making money, but we're not. So what's the point? Which I thought was a bit short-sighted, but so that's where the university is heading. It's towards innovation that will make money for them. And what we're seeing a lot here is, so for example, at the university, we're being pushed to recover laptops from students, but there's no push to recover data from students. There's a basic lack of understanding of why data are important and how they can be used, how they should be managed, and so on.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Sure.
Mike, you're talking about the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, that's a phrase that gets bandied about, but people using it often don't seem to understand that some of the things that they have to sign off on are part of that revolution of technology, and sort of clam up or get cold feet about all this data being shifted around and lack of control of what happens with it. And then, yeah, as already been remarked, there's some organizations have got very concerned about bringing in money. That happened with the CSIR a long time ago. Suddenly changed from the 1980s to not being so innovative as they could be, and focusing on values of contracts and stuff like that. So obviously there needs to be some kind of balance between the two, but as I remarked at the end, and as I'm demonstrating now, scientists are often poor communicators. Getting their message across is difficult.
Yeah, and I guess there's this contention between whether something should be done for the public good or whether there should be a commercial incentive behind it. Andrew wants to add, you put your hand up. Did you want to add some thought to that?
Sorry, I'm just being a bit distracted and not able to solve my technical problem with the system. So I've got a question, a point on this institutional challenges. It's linked to Jem's point on the previous slide around like maintaining links between between your platforms could be technically quite challenging. I think Jem made that point. And then I think that translates into kind of an institutional challenge where the institution has relied on experts outside of the institution to build a system, and one of the challenges would be then maintaining the interoperability, which I mean, I might be completely wrong, but it seems to be technically one of the more tricky things, and that real experts can fix those kind of problems. Whereas, your training for adding content would really equip the institutional people to solve adding content, but then and that could just be a perception, but that's just like something that I perceive as a potential institutional issue. But you can correct me if you think it's actually one of the simpler things to fix with training.
Thanks, Andrew. I added a card on your behalf there. Amy, you had some thoughts as well. Do you want to speak to them? We will run over by a few minutes. Is that okay for everybody, or do you want me to wrap it up like onto pronto?
Fine from our side.
Okay.
Fine with me.
Okay, great.
I just realized I was muted. I'm sorry.
You will.
I just think that, there's quite a lot of instances where data ownership and sensitivity can actually be a stumbling block. And sometimes it is sensitive data. If you have a rare or endangered animal and you have data on where these animals are located, you don't exactly want to broadcast that to the entire world because there are bad people out there too. So I think that is sometimes a challenge, that people just don't want to give you data because they're like, no, we own this data, or it's sensitive data.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Amy. Ciro, did you want to talk about your card a little bit?
Well, it's really issues about copyright, and a number of institutions are still very much steeped in the traditional copyright way, you know, of something is copyrighted and it cannot be shared. They haven't really moved to accept, you know, like the Creative Commons, you know, licensing, where things can be shared with the certain limitations. So that's a barrier, but also there are policies in institutions which can be hinder all these, because if and the policy in an institution is not something that you can change in one day. So if a policy exists, it takes a long time to change it to further interoperability. And of course, the poor internet in most parts of Africa also hinders this, because then people don't see the benefits. Or why should it be shared? How will I benefit? Or somebody else who has the advantage of having the power to access will benefit more than the owners, or that hinders. Yeah, that's my point. Thanks.
Have you had any success in changing this mindset? And if you have, what is the magic potion you used?
Well, for own where institutions I belong to, of course, if you have been there longer, then you are always pushing for the change of mindset, and things happen. But for other institutions, it's very difficult. But obviously, keeping on talking to the people who are buying into the idea to continue spreading the, as so to say, the gospel, that people actually start accepting, I think is really the way.
Yeah. Thanks, Ciro. All right. I added some similar thoughts, I think, about the contention between the willingness to share data and reticence to share data, which happens between different members of the same organization or between different organizations. Yeah, so thanks for those thoughts. I think that's really resonates well with the world out there and the problems that we have to face with. So we're going to go on to our last board now, which is more about the spatial scales. And maybe Helen, you'd like to just introduce, you did mention it in your intro, but maybe just sort of like to introduce your thinking a bit.
Okay. So it's just kind of like really speaking to, you know, obviously each country has their own requirements and needs from a perspective of an information system. But then we've seen quite clearly there are commonalities, and it's like, to what extent should we be delineating platforms based on country boundaries, especially when rivers, for example, cross boundaries for starters. And some regions like the Albertine Rift, you know, that's a region where they're all working towards a common goal. There, it doesn't really make sense to have boundaries. And then indeed, Africa is a continent. I mean, one of my, I think, shared wish with quite a few people is that at some point we could have an Africa-wide platform, you know, that maybe hasn't got as much detail, but would allow for all of the freshwater biodiversity information to be available at a continental scale. So those are the sort of the three thoughts. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks. Feel free to put your thoughts on the board if you have some. I cheated. I started the clock while you were talking. So, all right. If you're still busy, you can maybe carry on adding your cards while we're chatting. Ciro, do you want to talk a little bit about your card there?
Okay. It's just to emphasize that we really need to think beyond our little countries. I mean, it has been pumped into us about nationalism, but in the realms we are working on in the diversity world, we are actually not limited to countries, and we need to think beyond and help to break the barriers, even if they have been put there by the its treaties or other legislation. But I think we are the agents that can help break the barriers and make sure that the diversity is seen as going beyond boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Emily, you wanted to talk a little bit about the sovereignty issues of who owns data. You want to share your thoughts a bit on that?
There's been, I guess, concerns about just putting data out there that can then be viewed by anyone. Some might be sensitive. Some might want data to be stored in country or out of country, or yeah.
Are these sort of rational
No.
requirements?
Not necessarily rational, but it's something that can be raised, you know. It's
yeah. And I guess we need like counter arguments about why these are bad ideas. And if people are making these demands on us, you know, GBIF must have waded through a lot of red tape to get, you know, country nodes participating and sharing their data up to them. But I think part of that was by diluting the kind of information that they, you know, would accept. So to a minimum of, you know, just having a point location and a species name and a date maybe, or something like that. But even that's probably not dilute enough for many countries and organizations. Emily has also some thoughts about compatibility across borders.
So, I mean, if we're developing systems now that are based off each other, that are compatible, then, you know, you could just have a filter. Well, you only want to consider data from South Africa, or you want to consider data from cross-border rivers or from a region. So you could have different filters, you know, border-related filters as well.
You're just making me think as well that, like, in the context of how we've been building the BIMS sites, for example, we'd also have an issue if we're building cross-national data sets, that it might be more difficult to acquire the base data that we use for, you know, river names or geomorphology zone or whatever it is. So there's also some challenges that we'd have to think about relating to that. Ciro, do you want to add your thoughts? You've already mentioned yours, sorry. And Mike?
Yeah, sometimes when you're following other countries' examples, you need to bear in mind what they look like whether it works for Australia or the UK, where we're working with river systems that are self-contained, and then if you're in Lesotho or Swaziland or South Africa, you're very tightly bound to other systems, and you might need a different approach, like working on catchments rather than national boundaries.
Great. And Jeremy and Helen, did you want to add something?
I
Tim,
just put a thing there around the hierarchical nature of it, because it would be really awesome if you could, you know, I totally get why you need country-specific databases because of, you know, decision tools that are specific to a country. But the underlying biodiversity occurrence data, you know, is hugely valuable at scale. So it would be really nice if one had some sort of a hierarchical kind of upwards flow from a country specific, but then that data was also accessible via, you know, at a broader continental scale, for example, with much simpler spatial layers and filters and what have you.
Thanks. And Jeremy?
yeah, I think my points are quite similar to Helen. Helen's just arguing the benefits of both, you know, spatially defined and undefined data sets and management. But Tim, I know we're running short on time, but I have noticed there are quite a few interesting points coming up in the chat, especially from Nancy.
Sorry, I haven't been watching the chat.
And a few others that may be worth just touching on before we close.
Sure. So Nancy is saying in the story of SIAB, to GBIF, to FBIS, and the story of efficiency of funding is equally important for the country that SIAB survives and is adequately funded as a key major national resource for data, as well as the FBIS as platform for leveraging this info. Yes. SIAB is obviously funded nationally, and FBIS is funded on by the goodwill of donor funds at the moment, but yeah, we've got to figure out strategies for. I mean, I guess both of those sources of funding can be fragile, you know, over the long term. So it's good to figure out ways to make those platforms be sustainable without having to go and be commercial. You know, I don't know how we could reasonably commercialize these kind of platforms. They need to have goodwill behind them, I think, unless Helen's thought of some clever way of selling.
But that is our topic for 2 weeks' time, platform sustainability. So, and included in that is financial. So, yeah.
And then Nancy's also saying about developing bridges between open source and Microsoft platforms for institutions. I don't know if they are that much in juxtaposition as people might think. In fact, Microsoft, as an example, has been moving more and more towards being an open source company, believe it or not. I mean, they sell their services, but they huge hosts of open source and contributors to open source now. But I guess the underlying message there is that if your organization has built their software, like in the case of Sunby on .NET and Microsoft, and usurpers like ourselves come along with different technology choices, like how to get them to play along nicely, and that is an institutional challenge for sure. And then let's see. Msikiwa from Malawi is saying you couldn't get in on Figma, but he's saying that the capacity gap to manage the data in the current setup has no personnel to be managing the data. So there's the issue of having people available to manage data. And they've got JRS funded team in place, but again, the question is what happens when that funding ends? Will the data still be curated and updated and so on? And then he's also mentioned about the difficulty of having open access to data when researchers are not willing to share the data. And then the last thought from Nancy was about interoperability. also from a governance perspective, she would like to see institutions with biodiversity and freshwater data or mandates brought along, even if they're weakened by the lack of funding. Maybe we still need their expertise, even if we don't need their, or if we can't access their funds or their systems. Sorry you couldn't get onto the board as well, Nancy, but hopefully those that were on the board enjoyed having a bit more of an interactive discussion, and that there weren't too many technical challenges. Helen was before saying, "Oh, it sounds like I'm going on a limb there," but hopefully it was a more engaging way. I put two last ones on there. If we could take like a last one on this one, which is just basically trying to explore what our system. Maybe we can skip this one. I was just thinking that we could like put some thoughts about what makes our systems unique versus common to others. Maybe I'll leave that as a thought piece for the participants. And the last board was just to ask the same question that we asked in the beginning again. If I can unlock it again. Sorry, you have to zoom in a lot to see it. But just to say, after having all these discussions, do you still think that your organization's needs differ greatly from other organizations, or conversely, do you still think they're very much the same as other organizations? Maybe you can just cast your vote there. Probably an unfair election because the first round of voting didn't have all the voters on the platform yet. All right, and with that, thank you for participating in this session, and to Helen and Jeremy for convening this discussion. I think it's really something, like I said in the beginning, something close to our hearts when we're building these systems, and we're always trying to think about how to work together and avoid duplicating efforts. I hope there were some thought-provoking ideas for everybody who participated.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thanks, Tim. I must say I was a bit techno-averse when I first played this morning, but it's quite fun actually once you get into it. And it does allow for a more inclusive energy. But we'll need to capture this in our sort of recordings of it somehow. But anyway.
Well, I've recorded my screen, so everything will
yeah.
on there. Yeah.
So good. So yeah, thanks everyone. Sorry it's gone over, but thanks so much, Tim. Next week we're going to dive into sustainability. How do we? What are some of the challenges for keeping our systems going beyond a funded project, for example? And I think again, just like platform interoperability is a big topic, so is the sustainability, because at the end of the day, we want to see it going forward, not only data-wise, but admin and financially. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much. I don't know if anyone wants to chip in now. Go for it. Otherwise, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
The last question from Ciro asking, currently South Africa has the most amount of biodiversity data that is openly accessible. Do South Africans have cases of abuse of your data from users anywhere?
No, not that we're aware of. Yet.
So you need to help the rest of us to reduce the fear, because I think it's partly unfounded fears without any evidence that there is actual abuse.
And is the cost of abuse greater than the benefit of sharing the data, even if it does get abused? Is also something to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah, for that closing question. It's good thought-provoking question to end on.